call this meeting of the Grafton Planning Board to order. Monday, June 8th. It's June already. How did that happen? I don't know. But anyway, this meeting of the Grafton Planning Board is, as we've been doing recently, being conducted entirely remotely pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. Please note that this meeting is being recorded as well as being broadcast live on the Grafton Community Television Government Channel. Participation by the public for the public comment agenda item in the public hearings will be via the Zoom Q&A feature. Our town planner indicates that there is a way to enable some more direct participation at the appropriate times. If you are using the Q&A, please identify yourself by including your name. If Zoom hasn't managed to get your name on there, it's happened once or twice, via Q&A, your comment or question will be read and responded to at an appropriate point in the proceedings. And of course, every vote will be taken by roll call. And to begin the meeting, I'll call the roll of everybody who I expect to be here, just to make sure that we can hear everybody. Ms. Hassinger?
Here.
Mr. Hassinger?
Here.
Mr. Wood?
Here.
Mr. Venkatraman?
Yeah.
Mr. Dave? Glad to see you make it, not too late.
Yep, thank you.
Staff present would be Chris McGoldrick, our planner.
Here.
And Natalia Allward, office staff. And we do not yet have any participants from the public.
We have two.
Someone just showed up.
Yeah, there's two attendees from the public. We have Carlos Gomez and Greg.
Excellent. Yes, I was looking at the wrong part of my screen there. Very good. So let's get into our agenda. Our first item on the agenda, as always, is public input. If there's anybody here from the public who wishes to speak on an issue that's not already on the agenda, now would be the time to do that.
Mr. Chairman, I note we have a Q&A question which may be appropriate at this time. Would you like me to read it?
Yes.
So this is from Greg. I see that developer 136 LLC filed a continuance for the 80 Snow Road project earlier today. Was this continuance approved? And if so, will there be any discussion on it?
All right, so the answer to that is, and I should just run through all the public hearings, like the announcements again at 7:30. The continuance has yet to be approved by the board. We typically do that at the public hearing time when we will, when we reach the agenda item for that project, we will note that the applicant has requested a continuance. We may engage in a brief discussion regarding the project, and the board will then vote to presumably grant the continuance. And as I said, a brief discussion just regarding an item or two that the board wishes that the board would like everybody to be aware of as we move forward in preparation for waiting until the next meeting before we can continue any substantive discussion on that particular project. And just for the benefit of anybody who might be waiting for one of the 7:30 public hearings, the 4 projects on the agenda the Afonso Village Mixed Use Project at 100 Westboro Road, the special permit and site plan approval at 165 Worcester Street, the special permit and site plan approval at 274 Providence Road, and the special permit and site plan approval at 80 Snow Road. For all 4 of those projects, the applicant has requested a continuation because they're not ready to present any updated information to this board. So there will be no public hearing. The public hearings on those will be opened and then immediately continued. There will be little, if any, discussion. The discussion that might take place for any of those projects will be basically procedural in nature and not substantive regarding the merits of the project. So having said that, the one and only action item on our agenda is determination of minor modification for Cancun's at 75 Worcester Street regarding request for outdoor seating. I think it's sort of interesting to note that in a sense, the board, there is nothing for the board to modify because we could find no special permit, no site plan approval for this particular restaurant. They've been in, that place has been in operation as a restaurant for going back at least to 1975 and probably earlier. I haven't been around long enough to know when they first started as the Lake Ripple Restaurant. So although ownership has changed hands, it's been in pretty much continuous use as a restaurant. So just as a little bit of context, there's nothing that we can technically hang an approval on. Nevertheless, I do think it's worthwhile for us to discuss this and take whatever action we as a board feel we can and should do.
I swear we did something at some point. Not maybe it was a small something. I'm concerned about adequate parking, of course, like in all the cases.
I don't think he makes any difference. I'm not gonna make a comment.
Well, Chris, did you want to kind of start out in talking about this?
Yeah, so I mean, I do think having not found previous permits to hang it on is a bit of a unique challenge. I think if we write the recommendation similar to what we did and cite the actual address, that'll provide like some context that the board did review it. That you know, being a grandfather business, that it's those grandfathered conditions, we are modifying those, and we're aware of the changes that they're doing. So it puts on the record that we're aware of the changes that they're proposing and have considered impacts such as traffic and parking. And I think that'll help us to obviously, ideally would be to link it to a special permit or a site plan, but in this case, I think that's the best option we have is to cite it to the actual business.
Can I?
So the actually I see Carlos Jimenez raised hand. I believe that is the applicant, which we add to the Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'd like to add him to the speaking.
I think that would be appropriate at this point.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Oh, yep.
Yes.
All right, thanks for your time. So actually attached, there was a little, I submitted kind of the seating chart that we were looking at. Yeah, so the exit actually moved from closer to the building to the further end of the building. And then we measured the tables out. We got 24 tables. And then about the parking, I know you guys mentioned something. So at 24 tables, that would be 24 tables for 4-person seating. It would be 96 people. And then I believe that it's three people per parking space. So we would need 32 spaces. And then I tallied up the parking spaces that would be left on the Grafton Liquor side, which would be the bottom left, and then in the front. And we would have 58 parking spaces plus an additional 2 handicap spaces.
Yeah, part of the concern has been when they start to let you be indoors, then you'll be needing more parking, and this will be taking some of it. So
Right.
your case is a little different than the others. Every one of them is different.
Yeah.
I think, as I recall, what was for the previous requests that we fielded, we basically said that we thought this was okay through November 1st. Chances are no one's going to want to sit outdoors and come winter,
Right.
and that at some point, whenever you begin using the indoor space again, if you have a combination of indoor and outdoor space currently being used, we wanted to be some assurance that when you add up the total indoor and outdoor seating that you're going to be using, that you have sufficient parking for that combination.
Right.
And as of right now, it's pretty, it's not an issue. It becomes a bit of a concern once you start moving people inside again,
Right.
at which
Now-
point probably shrinking the outside.
Yeah, that's probably what we would do. We would probably shrink that outside pretty considerably, because I don't think everybody, if it rains, you kind of wash out the outside. And
Yeah.
then the other concern being, that if we were to be able to open back up in the inside and the outside, it would be tough to have that many people working both sections, so we would try to minimize the tables on the outside and reduce them maybe by half. And then that would open up more parking spaces. And then, I don't know what capacity they'll open up inside, and 25%, 50% capacity. So that's probably something we would most likely go that way.
I'm going to guess that the logistics of being able to serve combination of inside and outside tables would probably be more of a limiting factor for you than parking.
Yeah.
But what he can and can't manage isn't our number one problem. Our number one problem is to be sure that the requirements are met. Great if what he can do matches up with that.
Yeah, no, I mean, you guys tell me, and we follow what you guys say. So
I think Chris has some language already available for this.
Yeah, I think we had a pretty good template that we developed for the previous three requests, and I think we can pretty much use that. The unique thing about this is that we don't really have a special permit or site plan approval to hang this off of. But I think we're still thinking in terms of the same type of approval, giving you as much flexibility as you can, and an opportunity to get a little bit more business going without having any kind of an adverse impact on traffic or parking.
right.
The only thing I'll add to what was said is that, at least for me, had we had uploaded to our planning board meeting materials for this meeting, that second page that showed the seating chart and that little prose at the top, that would have been helpful for me to at least wrap my head a little bit more around what he was proposing with this layout. And, I'd like to try to have the relevant material, in advance of the meeting, so I can be fully prepared for coming in. But otherwise, I'm willing to make a motion that we.
Can I?
Oh,
Sorry.
go ahead. Sorry.
I was trying to get in earlier. Hola, Carlos. Disneha. One question I had is in terms of the pickup line, you calculated 50 something parking spots. So
Yeah, 58 and then 2 handicaps, so that would be 60.
I'm sorry, you excluded the pickup line, parking for the pickup line. Is that separate?
Yeah, that's separate. I didn't count those. The parking spaces we're losing is 16, but I didn't include those in my tally.
Okay, can you repeat? So you, for the 24 that you will have in terms of seating, how many parking are you? Did you say?
That will take up 18 parking spaces. Sorry.
That'll take up. But how many are remaining now? How many parking spots do you still have?
58.
And 58 doesn't include the curbside and the handicapped.
No.
Okay. Okay, I'm good. Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? If not, the chair would entertain the motion that I think Mr. Wood was beginning to make.
Yes,
I am curious whether he's gonna be able to serve alcohol out there.
So I'll note that's, I believe we discussed briefly in our Thursday meeting, the planning board process is a little bit separate from the alcohol, but all, especially for any businesses that watch this, it's important to remember that you still have to do the Board of Health process. I believe you've already begun that.
Yeah.
And also the police chief is in charge of the alcohol. So the select board has deferred that authority temporarily to the police chief. In terms of outdoor alcohol sales, if you haven't already, which I believe you have, just get in touch with the police chief on that. And then building department, I believe we were discussing tables with umbrellas. If a tent is required, you'll likely need a building permit for that as well. So, but that, I know we covered that in our Thursday meeting, but
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just worth making sure everybody's aware of that. That the fact that this board gives their stamp of approval to this particular plan does not relieve the applicant of responsibility for complying with all other applicable regulations. Anything else? Justin?
I move that we find this find this a minor modification and instruct the planner to draft up the appropriate language that includes the details on the parking shall not exceed and so forth that we discussed for the last
Second.
one.
I don't think that it's a minor modification because there's nothing to modify.
Yeah.
Minor modification of no existing prior thing with the
Yeah, I
cited
Yeah, I think,
Modification of the status quo.
yes, I think that's the way Chris tried to describe it, is it's a minor modification of the existing use that may have been grandfathered in. And that's the only tricky part about this is granting something that the board technically has no authority to do. But in the interest of making some progress and helping our businesses to get going, the fact that this board says, yeah, we like this, it doesn't hurt and it can help.
And I keep seeing demands for margaritas out there on social media.
Oh, I know. People call every day. It's funny. People call and they ask if we have margaritas to go, and then we tell them no, and they're like, "Oh, okay, that's all I wanted. Sorry." Try again. We're like,
Hopefully there will come a time.
yeah.
Yeah,
Especially with hot weather too. I'm sure people are,
That'll increase the demand for sure.
Yeah.
All right, any further discussion of the motion? Hearing none, we'll call the roll. Ms. Hassinger,
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger,
Aye.
Mr. Wood,
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman,
Aye.
Mr. Robbins votes aye. Declare the motion carried unanimously. But the planner will draft the appropriate letter and we'll go from there. Thank you very much, everybody.
All right, thank you guys. Thanks
Good
for your
luck.
time.
Let me see, what do we have next? We have a discussion item on the Citizen Planner Training Collaborative Webinar, Creating Master Plans with Wayne Biden.
yeah, so Mr. Chairman, I asked to have this on the agenda. This webinar was emailed to me, brought to my attention. It's one of the CPTC workshops. There is no cost to the town for attendance to this meeting. As a former student of Wayne Biden, I know that his courses can be really insightful and informative. The board, I'm sure, is aware that our master plan is fairly dated. I know I would like to at least look at the process of potentially updating. I know we've had some discussions of updating the master plan. Obviously, cost and such will go into that, but as much as we can attend some workshops, I'm going to try my best to attend this webinar, but I'd encourage board members, if they're free, it might help to bring some fresh ideas of how we can modernize our master plan and hopefully inspire us to move forward on that effort. So,
Yeah, I know I'm definitely interested in that. I've been off and on over the last several months. I've been, you know, making notes and adding to my notes about the master plan and my thoughts about updating it. And I'll be very interested to hear what Wayne has to say about it and see, together with the rest of us, see what we can do about taking some steps at least towards updating our master plan. We talk about it over the years, as Bob well knows.
Because I'm the one that's mostly talking about it.
If we can translate our talk into some action, I think that'd be great. So, you know, that's definitely of interest to me, and I'll have to make sure I put it on my calendar so I don't forget it. Any other thoughts related to that from the board? All right, moving on then. The next discussion item is the Mill Redevelopment Overlay District. You know, we set CMRPC to work on that. Any updates on that right now?
I don't currently have any updates, but I will reach out and see where they are in that process. So I'm sure they're quite busy, as we all are in this current time, but I'll make sure that we follow up with that.
Okay, the next item, subdivision rules and regulations update. We haven't really done much on that over the last couple of months. Been trying to give myself a kick to do more on it. And where I'm at with that right now is I've just about finished putting together a brief document regarding the stormwater regulations that we currently have in the subdivision rules and regulations. And we've touched on this a time or two over the last several years. What I think we would like to do is to see if we can get together with Jeff Walsh from Graves and get his thoughts, his suggestions for what we should do. There are at least one or two minor conflicts between what we've written in the subdivision rules and what's currently applicable from the Grafton stormwater regs. And like I said, I'm putting together a document that I think can be used as a basis for some discussion with Jeff Walsh. And if anybody else, I don't know, I was hoping to get it done a couple of days earlier so that we all had a chance to at least look it over. But depending on how you all want to proceed with this, I could just, maybe run it by Chris, and between the two of us, we can get in contact with Jeff Walsh, at least on an informal basis. The question was raised some number of weeks ago about whether it would require the town to pay Graves Engineering to do some work on this. I think that the answer to that depends in part upon how much Graves feels they would need to do with this. So it's sort of, as a starting point, I'd like to sort of at least have an idea of something that we can talk over with Jeff Walsh and try to scope out the amount of work. I mean, he may say, I can tell you everything you need to know in 5 minutes, which would be great. Or he may say, this is going to be several hours worth of work, to develop a set of recommended changes. So I think the first step, though, is just to touch base with him and find out, get a sense of what Graves can do and when and at what cost. Any thoughts from anybody else on the board on that?
Jeff might have one thing to say. Is there anything that's giving you trouble in what we have now? Do you have anything that you're concerned with?
Yes, that would be part of what I'd be interested in learning.
That he shouldn't have to charge for.
Yeah, so you know, the thought that maybe there really wouldn't be a lot of work involved in getting Graves' advice on this is what led me to think that we can at least have an initial conversation with him and get a sense of whether this is going to be something easy to take care of or whether it'll be more involved. So if there's no objections from the board, I'll get in touch with you, Chris, and we can get in touch with Graves and work out a way to start talking with them. Any other comments or thoughts on that?
I think that makes perfect sense. My only other two pieces is if you want just an extra set of eyes on the document you're thinking of sending, I'm happy to give it a once over myself. I don't know that I'll have much to add because I usually don't have much to add for the documents you draft, Dave, but I'll be happy to give it another shot. The other thought I have is it might be worth in that informal conversation with Graves saying that, yeah, our current, piece we're reaching out is about the stormwater, but if there's another area of our subdivision rules and regs that they have a concern with that they think is important to tackle, having them say at least the area may be a useful metric for us.
Yeah, so that ties in with another thought I've had relative to Graves, that there may be some other engineering related things in the subdivision rules that they might have an opinion on or some useful advice for us on possible changes. So yes, in that sense, my immediate concern is stormwater, but I do have the larger concern that if there's anything else that they would recommend that we update, I certainly appreciate their input. And just, I will, when I'm finished drafting my memo or whatever I want to call it, I'll circulate it to everybody on the board, and just want to be careful that it doesn't turn into a deliberation offline, but I think we can avoid that. If you have any comments that come back to me, then I'll take those and I won't do any kind of a round of discussion with the board. So I think we can deal with that. I appreciate the Justin, particularly you're bringing that up as an idea, because I can't assume that everything I write is 100% perfect. So on that, let's see. It's still a couple of minutes before anything else on the subdivision rules that anybody wants to bring up. One other thing I wanted to mention, a month or two ago, I had written a short document that summarizes the changes that I've found in other studies, plans, and so forth that recommend various subdivision rules changes. I've been wanting to take another look over that and try to call out the things I think we ought to be discussing. But if you have any a chance to review that, that's been posted online since I think the end of April on our website. But if you happen to have any time to review that and have any thoughts that you want to throw into the thinking on that, let's sort of plan on gathering those thoughts maybe for our next meeting. So it's still 7:29. I know a bill was circulated by email to the board shortly before the meeting.
I move that we accept the bills and authorize the planner to sign.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Wood.
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Aye.
Mr. Robbins votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. Planner is authorized to sign the bills. And my clock says it is now 7:30. And first item on our agenda our hearing agenda is the zoning bylaw amendment, which is one we actually have possibly some time on. If it's okay with the board, I'd like to just take care of the continuations requested. We can do that fairly quickly, and then we can spend however much time we need on the zoning bylaw. So the request for special permit and site plan approval at 100 Westboro Road. I haven't actually seen the applicant's request for continuation on that one. So does
So-
it have a date?
Yes, June 22nd, it seems. So I'll move that we accept the applicant's written request to continue the hearing until June 22nd, 2020 at 7:30 PM.
Second.
Second.
Moved and seconded that the board accept the applicant's request to continue to June 22nd. Any discussion on the motion?
I just wanted to point out, it might be helpful that the request is in relation to the applicant still being before the Conservation Commission, so.
Yes, my notes that I gathered up on the status say that they are currently scheduled to meet with Concom next week on the 16th. And that's basically what we've been waiting for, was them to get through with Concom. Any other discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Ms. Hassinger. Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Wood.
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Aye.
Mr. Robbins votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. The next project is the request for special permit and site plan approval at 165 Worcester Street. This one, the applicant is waiting to get through ZBA.
Yes.
And we have a continuation requested to the 13th of July.
Correct. I move that we accept the applicant's written request to continue till July 13th at 7:30 PM.
Second.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Wood.
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Aye.
Mr. Robbins votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. Next, we have request for special permit and site plan approval at 274 Providence Road. For this, we also have a request to continue to June 22nd. And again, we're waiting on the applicant responding to the peer review on this one.
So I move that we accept the applicant's written request to continue the hearing until June 22nd at 7:30 PM.
Second.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Ms. Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Wood.
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Aye.
Mr. Robbins, aye. Motion carried unanimously. And we have the request for special permit and site plan approval at 80 Snow Road, lot number 2. Here again, the project is waiting on Concom. They're currently scheduled for the 16th of June next week, and hence the request for continuation. On this one, we did have some discussion about a possible site visit from the board. And I think, at least informally, the board would be interested in undertaking a site visit either individually or collectively as members of the board. I don't know that we are prepared to make any definite arrangements for that right now, but I know at least a couple of us have indicated an interest in doing so. Is any further thoughts or discussion on that?
Yeah, so I know we do have a Q&A for this as well, but I'll just note one of the abutters has requested numerous times that members do a site visit. Specifically, he'd like to, I think, meet in person with people. Is that the the board is obviously able to create those if you'd like to set up a meeting all together or just individually go, whether it's with the abutter or not. That's your own personal purview, and you're under no obligation to. But obviously, I always recommend site visits. You have the opportunity to, because seeing something boots on the ground, as they say, is always helpful. But I'll continue to extend that invite, and I'm happy to help coordinate in any way where he's appropriate.
I'll say for at least myself, I drive by the property at least 2 or 3 times a week, but I haven't actually stepped out and walked any bit near that property. I wouldn't mind doing a site visit, but I would prefer if I'm to do one, that it be as well with just someone else from the board, at least, just because of my existing familiarity with the site. I'd rather, if I'm doing it, I want someone else that's not as familiar with me, just kind of be there.
So would it be fair to say that we should maybe over the next day or two uh, communicate amongst ourselves, trying to arrange a date and a time where if several of us want to meet together, I know that there's an invitation specifically to observe the site from the backyard at Fort Greeny Drive. And I'm certainly willing to do that as part of the site visit. But rather than us trying to take a lot of time tonight, negotiating a time, a date and a time, that's something we can do by email. But I think maybe over the next couple of days, if we couldn't set something like that up, we'll work with with Greg there at Fort Greeny Drive to also find a time that's convenient for him.
In the past, it's usually been pretty hard to organize a meeting where everybody can come to one of these. So I would say try to organize something that as many of us as can make it can come.
Yeah, that's what I had in mind. I'm not.
Leave it also that all of us can go on our own.
Yes.
At whatever time fits.
Yeah, I think so there doesn't right, there doesn't need to be any necessarily any coordination, but if we if it happens that two or three of us can get together at the same time, particularly with respect to the invitation from Greg there at Fort Greeny Drive, I'm sure he'd be willing to let all of us come separately and show us all around, but for his convenience as much as anything, if two or three of us can make it at the same time, it might be a help. So yeah, we'll coordinate that over the next 2 or 3 days, and however many of us want to try to get together, we can do it that way. And those of us who want to go there individually, we can do it that way. Works well either way. And I know there's
The other thing I'll just kind of mention, separate from the site visit, is that I know Chris expressed to us that we now have the ability as a town to allow people that are members of the public to speak at our meetings. That's not been our practice over Zoom so far, but it's been our practice in general in person. I don't know if we should take a formal vote of the board that we would want to allow that or not, but I think at least to me, it makes sense. I've always been an advocate of allowing actual verbal communication to
the more effective we can make the communication with the public, the better off we are, I think.
I'd like to see audio and video. The way this gets done is in the ones I've seen where it seemed to be working, somebody like Chris can control the mute on people.
Yep.
So when the chair recognizes someone, he unmutes them. But I'd like to have otherwise I haven't gotten to set up any of these Zoom meetings, so I don't know what all the options are. But I don't see any reason to not have everybody on screen, at least during their what they're interested in.
Yeah, so we do now have that capability of allowing public to speak. I'll note that there was a kind of a few Q&As here where Mr. Puchel is asking to be enabled, and he had a couple other questions, but it's I think I would leave it to the board to recognize, similar to a regular meeting, and then I'd be happy to give him that speaking ability. So if the chair feels that's appropriate, I can do that.
My only additional comment here, I saw Dave getting ready to speak, so I can be interrupted if you want me to, but that I do see Greg asked if we can enable his audio just for tonight. My only other comment, though, is that when we don't have the petitioner here, there's only so much that we can really take up on 80 Snow and without officially opening the public hearing, and so I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's kind of where my thinking is just heading, is that while the public hearing is technically open, we do have a request from the applicant to continue the hearing. And because the applicant is not here, I don't think it would be appropriate for us to engage in any substantive discussion regarding this project. You know, we're engaged right now in a procedural discussion, and that I'm comfortable with. I'm not comfortable with engaging in a substantive discussion. I do note that we have continued to receive written public input, and it's being posted to the website, and it's becoming part of the record. And all of that is subject to review by the board at any time and discussion during the public hearing when the applicant is present. The applicant, of course, can review the material as it's posted to the website, and as does often happen, the material comes in to us, the applicant sees it, and the applicant is able to respond.
The applicant could have been here though for our handling of his request. And
Yes.
have that happen often.
Yes, and quite often, and in fact, it's more the norm than not for the applicant or a representative of the applicant to be here just for the purpose of requesting continuation. But
And
under the
people-
current circumstances, yeah, under the current circumstances, things kind of work a little differently.
Yeah.
So is there anything else? I don't believe the motion has yet been made to grant the request for continuation.
There was, Greg mentioned one thing. I'll say in the newest materials, we've been sent a petition and we should look at it, but that's, I think, all we can say about it at this point. Quite
I'm not prepared to react to any of the material that's been submitted since the last meeting.
right, but it's there and people might want to be aware. The way stuff's been going up on the website is a little bit
Yes.
dynamic. I'd like us to have some time to be able to do our homework.
And I'll be remiss as well if I don't just point out the fact that there's another owner for 80 Snow Road Lot 3 that has submitted a request for a hearing, and that is scheduled right now for June 22nd.
Oh.
For Lot 3.
It'd be really good for us to see that material as soon as we can, like before we go out there.
Okay.
There we go.
So I guess it is within reason to make the motion to continue this hearing till June 22nd at 7:30 p.m.
Second,
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Ms. Hassinger,
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger,
aye.
Mr. Wood,
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman,
Aye.
Robbins votes aye. Motion carried unanimously, and we will look forward to continuing all of these projects at the next available opportunity.
You know, it's gonna
Yeah.
come back and bite us, all of these continuances.
We're gonna be going to weekly meetings or more. Either that or we'll just take the 10 o'clock vote off the agenda.
No.
All right, we do have one public hearing remaining on our agenda, and that is the proposed zoning amendment for the Village Mixed Use Gateway Zone. We've had some discussions on that in previous meetings, which led up to us voting to have it submitted to the town meeting warrant, although curiously it appears on the warrant as having been submitted by the town administrator. Regardless of how it got onto the warrant, we are required to hold a public hearing on it. And following the public hearing, to approve a recommendation to be presented at town meeting. So,
I do have a notice, Mr. Chair.
yes,
Pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 5, the Grafton Planning Board will hold a public hearing on Monday, June 8th, 2020, commencing at 7:30 p.m. The purpose of the public hearing is to provide interested parties the opportunity to comment on a proposed amendment to the Grafton zoning bylaw, which was been submitted to the 2020 spring annual town meeting warrant as follows. Amend Section 12 entitled Village Mixed Use District to allow for the creation of a new VMU zoning district designated Village Mixed Use Gateway, VMU-GW, and revise and reformat the existing language. A complete copy of the text of the proposed amendments to the Grafton zoning bylaw is on file with the town clerk and is available for public inspection on the Town of Grafton website at www.grafton-ma.gov on the Planning Board/Zoning Initiatives and Proposed Town Meeting Warrant Articles webpage. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March Stay-at-Home Advisory, this hearing will be conducted via remote participation. Please see www.grafton-ma.gov/planning board for more information.
All right, now, Chris, were you prepared to give any sort of a presentation on this bylaw amendment?
Yes, so I think we had discussed previously when it was still in draft form. We've taken into account some of those comments, but this zoning article is mainly in relation to 27 Upton Street, which is the old DPW site. It includes additional parcels around, which creates a very kind of consistent zone, and primarily the town is in Article, I believe it's Article 19, the town will be looking to dispose of that property via town meeting vote. So this dovetails with that in a way, using the mixed use zoning, which we've seen produce some favorable results in attracting projects that really fit with the area, so that it is slightly tweaked in order to fit that actual site and some of the development constraints that we're aware of in that area. So it allows some flexibility and mixed use development style. It's a kind of modern zoning standards, and hopefully makes that site more attractive, as well as you know, if the town does vote to dispose of the property, it'll be not only more attractive to developers, but any future proposed projects would then be more in line with some of the development standards that we've been looking for zoning. So it provides those modern standards to that site, and that's the main gist of it.
I see one or two attendees that might possibly be interested in this. Just for by way of a little bit more introduction, Chris, could you display the map showing where it is, and then there were some artists, a rendering of what it might look like.
Yep.
Well, Chris is bringing that up. I had a question on the amendment. Just a clarification. It's the principal uses and districts. I couldn't find the legend. I'm guessing N means no, but what does an S and a P mean?
N means it's prohibited. S means it's allowed by special permit.
Okay.
P means it's allowed by site plan review, and Y means it's allowed by right.
Okay.
Those are right there on the at the top or the bottom of the use schedule.
So this is our draft map of the parcels. So this is the 27 Upton here. And as I noted, there was the two, I believe these are residential parcels, and then the post office. So that does, by including those parcels, we have more consistent street front. So whether or not it unfolds that way, but if a development were to incorporate an acquisition of those residential parcels, it may help to alleviate some of those constraints, but it doesn't have to happen that way.
It's just a small clarification. The DPW property is actually two of those parcels.
Sorry.
That little square one to the right, parcel 84, is where the DPW barn sits. For some reason, it's technically it's two parcels, but together those are the two parcels that are the DPW side. And to the left of that, the strip that has long frontage on the road, that's the house, and then the farthest to the left there, parcel 82, is the post office.
And then I'll pull up the renderings as well, but it'll just take me a minute.
Bob,
Just
there's a legend here, at least on this one.
And just for clarity, for anyone watching along, I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this as well, but the rendering is, strictly speaking, just a single example of what is possible at this location, not anything about any proposal or anything like that.
Yes, we do not have a proposal in hand. The visioning project that led to this, the rendering is an idea of an example of what might be built there.
Yeah, thank you. That's as much as I may enjoy reading zoning, we know that it doesn't really always translate into a visual that people can react to. So although this isn't a formal proposal, this just shows what we're hoping this zoning will bring about in terms of development or something similar. So these were put together by Horsley Witten, our consultant, Nate Kelly. And so that's kind of helping us to visualize what could be there under these zoning regulations. So we see proposing essentially, or not proposing, they are showing that some of the site constraints that we're aware of are some fairly significant wetlands in the area, which would be more amenable to more compact development, preserving those wetlands, providing lower impact. So we see kind of mixed use buildings here, and then residential townhouses. That's a proposal that would be in line with this new gateway district. So showing that up a little more up close. It's the residential units, live workspace, and mixed use. Again, showing that, integrating things like the trailheads, those are all part of our regular use standard. And those are things that we're for in any proposal for the site. So this is another kind of visualization looking at kind of scale, looking at potentially 3 stories, but in a suburban rural architectural standard. Again, that's provisions that our zoning bylaw and the development standards require a potential developer to fit within those criteria. Those are the visualizations that I can definitely, if you want to talk in more detail of either one of those views, I'm happy to scroll to that.
Well, since this is a public hearing on the bylaw, on the proposed bylaw amendment, I'll ask, first of all, if any of the board members have anything they want to add or ask about.
I did have one process question. Was the notice really adequate, or are we gonna get people at town meeting who say, I had no idea where that was? It didn't, the notice doesn't really tell anybody where that is. No one knows where the gateway is, except half a dozen of us have seen that. Probably procedurally sufficient, but I'm saying, no matter how much you tell people at town meeting, there should still be, you didn't tell me enough.
Yeah, I think we always get that.
But but that when I saw the notice, it really, I wondered about it.
Any other thoughts from the board? If we have anybody from the public who would like to ask a question about this or make a comment on that, now would be the time to do that, either by Q&A or if you're sufficiently interested, you can use the Q&A to request being allowed to speak. And we'll loop you in with the audio, since we now have that capability. And if we don't hear any comments from the public,
I just have one question so we are not approving anything, right? This is for the town to approve at the meeting.
Yeah, so I can bring up the draft recommendation. So I've drafted a planning board report, which is in line with past recommendations.
yeah, so as a procedural matter, if we have no further input from the public and no further input to be applied or to be brought forward during the public hearing, we can close the public hearing and then we can draft our planning board report. And just as a procedural matter, from to partly answer your question, Vikram, that
I move we close the hearing.
Pardon me, Bob?
3 times. I move we close the hearing.
Okay.
Second.
Moved and seconded that we close the hearing. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Ms. Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Wood.
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Aye.
Mr. Robbins votes aye. Motion carried. The public hearing is closed. And now we have a draft planning board report. You know, this is something, for those of you who aren't aware of the process, this is something that we owe to town meeting, basically. That when town meeting gets to the point of voting on this this proposal, after the motion is made under the warrant article, the planning board then gets to read its report. The planning board is supposed to either recommend or for or against this article. A zoning bylaw change that the planning board opposes is not allowed to come back for 2 years unless the planning board says it's okay. So that's kind of a little bit of the reason why we're doing this.
Not sure that's precisely true, but close enough.
Yes, it's, you know, there's some wrinkles to that, but basically, yeah. So we
And I
have
have a-
before us a draft planning board report.
I have a edit to this draft that I want to call out, that in the 3rd paragraph in there, at the public hearing, the town planner and consultant Nate Kelly. We did not hear from Nate Kelly tonight. So I think we should take that part of it out. So the town planner reviewed the proposed bylaw change.
Yes, it would be helpful to have an accurate description of what transpired at the public hearing. And to add to that, Justin, since we have now closed the public hearing, we can add the note here that no members of the public commented on this. We have some language we typically use in these reports, and I don't remember it off the top of my head, but we basically want to note whether or not any members of the public were present and commented on this, and if there were any comments, the board's report would deal with that as well.
Yep, I can add that.
Anything else on the draft report?
I guess if the report says we approved it, we ought to vote to approve it. Maybe we could vote to approve it and with the appropriately and issue the report with appropriate adjustments discussed and make that a motion.
Yeah. Did I hear you make a motion, Bob? I think I did.
Yeah.
Is there a second?
I'll second, presuming Bob meant to recommend rather than to approve.
Well, approve the report.
Yes,
I don't,
The last line does say to recommend / defeat, so I wanted to be.
yes.
So I left that ambiguous just in previous discussion of the decision. Didn't want me to presume the,
I agree with how you worded that, Chris. I was just being
Yeah, this
clear
was-
in the second.
Right. We want to make sure that the vote on this is to approve the report and recommend that the article be passed.
that was my intent.
I think that was the intent.
And second.
Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Ms. Hassinger,
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger,
Aye.
Mr. Wood,
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman,
Aye.
Mr. Robbins votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. The board approves the report, including a recommendation that town meeting pass the article. Okie dokie. What else do we have on our agenda? Back up under general business. We have no minutes of previous meetings. We probably have at least a brief staff report.
yep. And I did, maybe slightly off topic from staff report, but I did want to kind of bring it to the board's attention. So we've been working with businesses, as you well know, to get through the planning board process as businesses look to reopen. One of the questions that's been coming up at development team meeting, and I want to speak generally about it tonight, although I do have specific instances in mind. But looking at the governor's recommendations and phasing how that plays out, some businesses are not as aligned with how it's defined in the governor's orders. So, for example, bars are supposed to be opening at phase 4, but there's some question in other communities with businesses such as beer gardens, where there's maybe not full kitchen facilities, but there is food service in terms of, pizzas and sandwiches, and there's other instances in other communities where parking of a food truck, whether or not that constitutes a restaurant under the, which category they fall under. And so some of those questions are coming up, and obviously I don't feel that's appropriate for me to determine, but I wanted to give the board an opportunity to discuss some of those nuances and help give me direction on how you'd like to see those handled. It's a bit of a big ask, and we discuss it time, but
Have you or anyone in the municipal staff reached out to the state to see if they had any additional guidance or anything else they could provide around those questions?
no, I can definitely do that. So that's this discussion has been happening. It kind of cropped up on Thursday and has been progressing this afternoon. And so that's why I wanted to kind of briefly touch on it. I'll definitely reach out to the state. So some of the reference material, there's articles in the Boston Globe, and I believe the Telegraph, some Worcester businesses, the beer garden in Worcester, and those are following a similar process as we did. And again, those questions where a food truck businesses, they expand their menu or a restaurant. Obviously, a lot of businesses want to be open, and I think there is a difference, certainly from the health department in terms of the bar and what's a restaurant, but just in terms of those definitions, as we know in our own zoning, that some businesses fall in a gray area of those definitions. We may need to work to create a process to address that.
just off the top of my head, and this is something that particularly requires some thought and more information. But just off the top of my head, and generally speaking, under the zoning bylaw, the interpretation of which category of zoning a particular business fits in is primarily up to the building inspector. Now, he's the zoning enforcement officer. He's really the first line of deciding, does it fit into this slot on the use table or that slot on the use table? In the current circumstances, I think there can't help but be some ambiguity there. The questions we've dealt with earlier this evening with Cancun's and previously with Reunion and the others, adding temporary outdoor dining to a sit-down restaurant there's no really good place to fit it, and so it's sort of we're in unusual circumstances, and at least in our lifetimes, unprecedented, and maybe forever, because the last comparable situation would be the 1918 flu epidemic, and zoning didn't exist back then. There were not a lot of regulations back then, so the circumstances we find ourselves in now, particularly with respect to the reopening of businesses and the unusual requirements to have to apply, we're breaking new ground here. And so I'm not surprised that there are a lot of questions, and give me a little bit more information. I'll be glad to offer my opinion. But like I say, sort of the first line of reference for how things fit within zoning would be Mr. Berger.
Also, I would think that if you're talking about places that serve alcohol, like a bar or something like that, it also has to go through the legal chief. That's really not zoning. I mean, whether we're classifying it a bar or not would be in the initial how it was permitted. But I think that the police chief has some call there, and the state. Let's face it, they're really the ones who are declaring who can open at what window. And from what I gather, when I talked to someone today, it had nothing to do with this. She said that even things like hair cutting, it's only opening in like little segments. It's not like all of a sudden a hair salon does everything. They don't. They can only cut hair, period. No nails, no anything else.
Most of that is in the governor's or the whoever's plans, though. If we don't see it in the newspaper, but there's all kinds of stuff for all of these, and it still takes a lot of interpretation.
Yeah.
The question is, who's in charge of the interpretation?
Yes.
And
When it comes
that,
right. So when it comes to what the zoning bylaw says,
Yes.
yeah, that's we kind of know whose primary responsibility that is.
Yeah.
Beyond that,
The governor's categories in his plan weren't nicely fitted to any categories or combination of categories in our bylaw.
yeah,
That's the problem.
that's where the uncertainties and ambiguities come about. It's partly a question of, well, I want to do something as a business. I want to do whatever I can, and how can I do that? And who do I even go to in town? Because there's no one individual or board in town that kind of covers everything. So the building inspector has some responsibility. We may get involved as the planning board when it
Board of
comes
Health, Selectmen.
in our purview. The select board is involved when it comes to alcohol. The Board of Health is involved. Fire may be involved when it comes to making sure that you've got fire safety covered. The police department for alcohol and other public safety concerns. So there's just a lot of places that, and when we're collectively we're dealing with something that's kind of new here, and we're still trying to figure out how to make it all work.
Much
We as a town don't want to, we don't want to make things unnecessarily difficult for our businesses.
Yeah, that was kind of why I asked about the state as well, because if the state could say, you know, well, your planning board and or zoning officer determines that, then that's, you know, clearly okay. Well, we can tell you that you can open or we can't. But at the same time, I don't want us to say, well, yes, you know, you serve food, so you're a restaurant, so you can do that, even if it's only a little bit of food. But then the state has a different definition, and then, you know, it could run afoul of other things. I don't want it to be messy. It's the bottom line.
Let's,
Right.
how about it if we field the issues if and when they
Yeah, I think
come to
it's-
where our help is needed?
Yeah.
Because we can talk about this forever and there are no answers, so it
Yeah.
won't help us much.
I'm afraid that's not much help for Chris, but I think it's going to be just a case by case, you know, just looking at it and best call.
Yeah, this was helpful for me, and I think what I'm hearing is, and I think we'll, as these businesses kind of come up with these unique questions, I'll definitely put them before the board for you guys to consider. But I wanted to have that discussion. I think in some of the ones that we have in the docket coming up will probably be a little more unique. You know, we've had some pretty clear restaurants up until now, but we may be running into some more unique situations that I just wanted to have that discussion and see what your impressions were. So thank you.
I'll say, at least for myself, to Chris, is that if there's a particular like business or type of question that's coming up that will be coming before us, even if it's at, you know, during staff report or discussion or something, you know, if you can provide us, or even if it's not necessarily great for the meeting materials page, you know, information on what that question is, it gives me an opportunity to at least try to research with what the state, you know, guidelines are in relation to that business, or, you know, that type of thing ahead of the meeting, so I can be most prepared for this.
Yeah, and I'll definitely add some of the articles that I was reading. I'll add those to the materials just for the board to review going into that, and yeah. But again, I apologize. This was kind of a Thursday into this morning, kind of afternoon, still developing. So
I think it's going to develop for a while.
yes.
Well, when anything surfaces, let us know directly. Don't wait for us to stumble onto it on the website or anything like that. As at least some of us, maybe all of us, try to do our homework maybe a lot more homework than some other bodies.
Yeah, noted. I'll do better of not. I know we've been trying to keep up with the meeting materials, but I'll send some emails out for some of that kind of other background stuff that maybe the board wants to review. So
If you send it BCC, then each of us can reply with any thoughts we have to you.
Yep.
Anything else by way of a staff report, Chris?
No, I think that was mainly it. We do have, I think we discussed briefly about 8 Pine Street. I did provide a recommendation from the planning department, not the planning board, but our department specifically, recommending GSX for that. So that is before the selectmen on, sorry, I lost the date.
Tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night, yep. So that was my recommendation. My memo's been put in those meeting materials. If you'd like to read, I won't go into much on it.
For those watching, I can say as well that the proposals, you know, was what I see in front of me here for that. The GSX specifically has 306 units, 77 of which are affordable. So that my understanding is that also means the whole site ends up being counted as our affordable inventory.
If
Yes.
it's rental.
Yeah, if it's run.
And 11,340 square feet of retail.
Yeah, the materials from GSX are now up on under the development projects under 8 Pine Street. And I took a look through that this afternoon. A lot of what they uploaded there was background information on the various companies that are involved. But toward the end of the package is a nice description of the project that they're proposing, a sort of a schematic idea of what they're proposing. It's interesting. It's if it moves forward, it will be our first 40R project. We've had the 40R zone in Fisherville Mill for a long time, and nothing has yet happened there. We did this much more recently, but if this comes through, I think the project looks good to me, looks attractive to me, and it will, assuming they follow. They have some due diligence to do. Assuming the select board moves forward with this, the GSX has they're planning several months of due diligence around some site work or site examination, evaluation, and then they get into the permitting process. So unless this stops for some reason, we will see them before us within a few months. All right, I don't see any correspondence. And do we have any reports from planning board representatives on town committee and CMRPC? Bob?
Yes, CMRPC's annual meeting was scheduled for about now, but it had to be postponed. We are having the annual meeting virtually to take care of business, and there's a presentation, there's information I can send you. I believe that's this Thursday evening. I think that's right. And they've at least tentatively scheduled essentially the get together, the physical get together and have dinner and do all that stuff for early September at our golf course here in Grafton. And
we'll go. We should all go.
Yeah. Anyway, that's my point is that we should see if we can't do that, or at least as many as possible. I'm a representative delegate.
Yeah.
Probably, but then we have a couple from the selectmen side too, and those actually we need people to come to the meeting on Thursday night because we have to have a quorum in order to do the business that we have to do. So really would like to get that.
Most of the meetings, other meetings I have not been able to join, they have right in the middle of the business day at 10:30 a.m. and 10 a.m. and stuff. So those I can make it. Anything after 4:30, I can always attend. There are very few that are late in the evening, but if it's going to be on Thursday night, I can definitely be there.
Yeah, you should have gotten email.
I have email.
Okay.
And the schedule doesn't work for me. If it is at 10 o'clock or 10:30 in the morning, I'm not going to step out of my work at all times. This meeting.
Those aren't the CMRPC meetings that we as delegates go to are almost always on Thursday nights. Most of my Thursdays are taken up between the different committees. I have something to say about a lot of it. Okay.
I will connect with you offline, Bob. I don't think if there is a regular one for Thursday evening, I don't have any of that information, but I'll connect with you offline. I don't have that details with me.
I think Janet sent out an email today. Of course, the question is whether you're properly reported on there as the member. And there's been some confusion about that. Chris and Natalie, could we make sure right away that we have that straight, please?
Yes, I'll do that, absolutely.
I think that, I keep being told, yeah, we've told them. And then I ask up there and they say they haven't heard. So there's a disconnect someplace.
Well, we had that same thing before with the library.
Yeah.
I have an update on the library building planning committee.
Yes.
So I walked out of the last meeting with an understanding. One was the big update was the COVID situation never actually stopped the project work. By the time we were supposed to be implementing the governor's orders, we were back to restarting the work. So it had to be slowed down. We couldn't abruptly stop the work. By the time we had a couple of weeks to come to a stop, we could restart work. So it never really stopped. So COVID really did not impact the project work. It's the rains that caused the major impact. The bigger update was from the last meeting. I didn't walk out from the last meeting with a clear understanding if we were in the red or not from a projected cost perspective. I'm reading the latest report as of 5/31 from Andy. It clearly states that projected cost, we would be in the red for about $818,000. Where will this money come from? What conversations need to happen? Who's making any decisions around how do we mobilize this additional fund? If we get to that, this is projected cost. This is not the actual cost. This is projected at the end of the project. I don't know who has to act on that. Is that the select board? Is that supposed to come back to the town meeting?
I have some added information if that helps, just because of the previous select board meeting this past week. They actually did have a change order in there that was in last week's packet that does say the total change order is for, out of all of them, $858,794.
Yeah.
Definitely above and beyond the contingency budget that was set aside, but because of other bids coming in under, they expect to be within their allotted borrowing capacity for the library. They don't anticipate going over, and they will be potentially looking to reduce some costs elsewhere. At one meeting I had this week, it was quipped from Brooke Paget, who's the select board delegate for the library committee, is that one thing they'll possibly be getting rid of is the amphitheater. And at the select board meeting, it was also discussed, I think it was from Tim, that they're also looking at potentially like office equipment and furniture kind of setups inside the library being reduced.
So there are two parts, right? So thanks for that, Justin. So the town approved for 14.889 million. That was what was approved by the town. That's what I'm seeing in the first one. The variance or the estimated projected cost is 15.707. Something has to give. Either we need to get more money or the scope has to come down. And who makes that decision?
Okay, just for clarity, the town meeting actually authorized up to 16.7, I think it is, 16.7 million for the project. That was authorized by town meeting. That's the borrowing capacity.
Borrowing, okay.
The bids came in at the 14 million and change, as you noted.
Right.
And subsequent to the bids, and that project cost included a contingency. And
Right.
Subsequent to that, they've gone above and beyond what the original estimate was. Once they got the bids in, and they included the contingency, they're now beyond what they thought they would, but they're still within the total amount that was authorized by town meeting. So, and unless their costs continue to overrun and go beyond the 16 point whatever million,
Okay.
no further action is required. In the worst case, if say another million or more in unanticipated costs crop up, they will then have to do what we did for the DPW project, which is to have town meeting authorize some additional borrowing, which it is allowed, but
Or descope, like Justin was pointing out.
yeah. Now, obviously, from what you say and what else I've heard, that I heard the same things Justin heard at the select board meeting last week, that they are looking to reduce some expenses. So in the end, they are probably, hopefully, not going to exceed the 16 million and change.
Okay.
And I think the way Andy put it was, at least the way I heard it, was that they're about 95% done with the excavation, which is where all the cost overruns have come, or most of them. So he was hopeful that they wouldn't have that much more in unanticipated costs. And once the excavation is done, the construction part of it is less likely to run over. But time will tell. No one thought it would run over as much as it has.
And I think maybe part of Prabhu's question was who gets who's the gatekeeper? I think that the gatekeeper in this case is selectmen with change orders.
Yeah,
That's where, until they get up to where they don't have any more money in the borrowing authorization.
Okay. Thanks, Bob.
And go ahead.
Thanks, Bob. Go ahead.
All I was going to say is just to add to what they discussed at the select board meeting as well is that this going as high as it has for the contamination removal was two parts. Number one, as Prabhu mentioned, it was very wet over the past period of time, so the rain made the material weigh a lot more, so more trips, and they actually had to excavate more than they initially estimated as well. That was what I had heard.
any other reports? Anything else on the library? Any other reports?
I do want to say, as far as reports, the CPC had two public forums this past week, one on affordable housing, one regarding open space and recreation. Those have both been recorded and are available on the Juicy TV on demand, either through the actual Juicy TV website or YouTube. They are, additionally, there's one for this coming Wednesday on historic preservation. That is also going to be live via Zoom and then recorded and published. And the CPC survey regarding what the town would like to see out of a CPC plan with the understanding of CPC is still live, and the CPC would like more respondents.
Respond if you haven't already, if you care to. Anything else on CPC, Justin? Bob?
Nothing more from me.
Just a question. There's been some discussion, social media here lately about CPC and different things about where its money comes from, what it does with them, and what might happen. I'm interested in how much future obligation CPC has at this point. That is borrowing, paying off borrowing over future years. I think it would be good to get a little more definition than most of us have seen. I was amazed that they could do that, but there is quite a lot actually. I think some of the land I know have that.
So yeah, I'm not on. I don't go on the social media as much, but I'm not sure of the specific discussion that you're referencing. But I believe some of that discussion, and correct me if I'm wrong, was stemming from the potential for using CPC funding to reimburse Affordable Housing Trust if they dispense the funds to address kind of rental assistance and other kind of housing assistance related to COVID-19. Is that correct?
I'm sure that was part of it. My question though is that there's talk even of trying to do away with CPC. People were talking about doing whatever one does if they can figure it out to stop having CPC. But there are future obligations already taken on. So it's a interesting situation there that with more information would be very helpful.
Yeah, in my immediately available documents, I don't see what that obligation is offhand. I do know that there's been a few projects with CPC that are bonded. We bonded with CPC money, and they're paid back each cycle with the income from CPA funds.
Right.
So, and that's located every town meeting that we use that, but we need to pay towards the bonds. I don't have offhand how far we are into those. Like, for example, one of the bonds is the Pell Farm bond. That's one of the examples.
I think Hassan and Messett maybe too. Is it whatever it is?
I'm not sure the total magnitude of the CPC future commitment is, but I do remember looking, for some reason I looked this up not too long ago, and And we could sort of withdraw from CPC, but we would basically continue the CPC surcharge in a amount necessary to continue funding the obligation. So we could basically do nothing new with CPC. We could withdraw from it to the extent of not being able to do anything new, but we still have to collect the surcharge to pay out the remaining obligations.
Yeah, well, that sounds like a complicated process depending on who has to vote how. And
Yeah,
I think it was a town vote to adopt.
it was.
So it's
Yeah,
probably at the very least a town vote to drop out. And if you're gonna have a moving target, someone's gonna have a fair amount of working out all of that.
Yeah, not our problem for tonight, though.
Well, but CBC is in the middle of a bunch of stuff right now.
It's a matter of some interest to some of us.
If you'd like, Bob, I can certainly email the treasurer, including the chair of the CPC, saying there was an interest in our board for that information, and if we can get that back to you and or us in some way, that'd be appreciated.
But I think that there's a lot of places where that information can be helpful, make available.
We're just sort of filling time right now. I do have one brief report from the committee that I'm the board's representative on, and that would be the Open Space and Recreation Plan Committee. The OSRP committee did approve the draft Open Space and Recreation Plan that's been sent off to the state for their approval. It also needs to come before this board as well as the select board for letters of endorsement. It didn't occur to me, Chris or Natalia, that maybe we should have put that on the agenda for tonight, but let's make sure we get it on the agenda for the next time. And prior to that, make sure that everybody on the board has a link to the document so that we all have a chance to review it prior to us sort of formally reviewing it at a meeting. And let's take care of whatever details need to be taken care of so that we can get this board to do its part.
Yes, I apologize for missing that. I'll have it on for the 22nd. We'll get the materials up shortly.
Oh, are we ready for a motion?
On the assumption that there are no other items that may lawfully come before the board, the chair would be delighted to entertain a motion.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded that we adjourn this meeting. Ms. Hassinger,
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger,
Aye.
Mr. Wood,
Hey,
Mr. Venkataraman,
Aye.
Mr. Robbins votes aye. Declare the motion carried by a vote of 4 in favor and 1 against.